You're listening to Edgy Voices, Champion Foster Futures, a podcast amplifying the voices of those transforming education for children in foster care. Each episode brings you real stories, research, and advocacy efforts to improve the lives of foster youth. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in.
Welcome back to Edgy Voices, Championing Foster Futures. I'm Dr. Stephanie Barbary.
And I'm Dr. Dusty Palmer. Today's episode is From Foster Care to Adulthood, Resilience, Education, and Advocacy.
Today we're joined by Tabitha, an adult professional whose lived experience in the foster care system helped shape her perspective and fuel her passion for supporting youth and families. Those early challenges gave her a deep understanding of the system and a commitment to meaningful advocacy.
Tabitha has also used the Texas Foster Care Tuition Waiver to complete her bachelor's degree in human science and is now pursuing her MBA at Angelo State University. Tabitha, we're really grateful you're here and willing to share your journey. Before we jump into questions, we'd love to give you a moment to share any opening thoughts with our listeners.
Yes, I am super excited as a Red Raider alumni to be here along you two and be able to talk about these important topics for children that are in the foster care system.
As we start, we always like to say, share only what you're comfortable sharing. You can skip any question. This is your story. So Tabitha, can you tell us your journey into foster care and then a little bit about your journey transitioning from foster care into adulthood? What were some of the major transitions or challenges along the way?
My journey into the foster care system, I am the youngest girl of 6 children, and so my family experienced a lot at a very young development of our family life. And so when I was 8 years old, my father was arrested for murder. In that process, he actually was convicted of another murder. So you can imagine the type of home life that as a young child, age 8, I had experienced. My mother, she had been a victim of domestic violence. I say whenever this happened, she kind of found a new identity, and mothering was not in that identity for a time. And so that was my first removal, during that time was my first removal from my parents and my mother going into the foster care system. I was removed and returned about 3 times. And on my 3rd removal, I was placed into the Children's Home of Lubbock. I stayed there for about 1.5 years, and that was such a foundational moment for me in my childhood, but also just creating a sense of support within the foster care system. I was adopted by my maternal uncle, and I received CASA volunteer on that removal. You know, in hindsight, so many positive things happened for me during that time. I also received my education waiver during that time, and so I've been able to go on this higher education journey without any cost, and I'm so thankful for the foster care system and all the advocates who, well over 20 and 50 years ago, have known how important that resource would be for children in foster care.
Wow. So some youth leave foster care aren't always told about the resources like the Texas tuition and fee waiver for college. Can you expand on that a little bit about that waiver?
Yes, definitely. So the waiver essentially is a sheet of paper that you can get from your local Child Protective Services office. You give them your name, your information. They're able to look up your case profile, and you can get that paper and give it to your public institution. So it does have to be a public institution. I'm not too familiar if there's any type of accommodations that private institutions have, but I know for the state of Texas, predominantly it is designated for public institutions. And so I was able to actually get that. I was about 23 years old whenever I got access to the waiver, and I started my journey at South Plains Community College. It essentially gives access to former foster youth with that tuition waiver. You are only expected to pay for books. There can also be some housing support depending on the situation as well.
Before we move on, I want to pause for just a moment and highlight something Tabitha mentioned, the Texas Foster Care Tuition and Fee Waiver. For listeners who may not know, the Texas law provides a tuition and required fee waiver at any public college or university in the state for students who are in foster care. It's written into the Texas Education Code, section 54.366, and it can remove one of the biggest barriers to education, higher ed, which is tuition costs. And so if a young person was in DFPS conservatorship at certain key points like aging out of care, graduating high school while in care, or being adopted after age 14, they could qualify. The key detail is that they must enroll in a Texas public college before their 25th birthday to activate the benefit. It doesn't cover housing or books, but it does cover tuition and required fees, and there's no GPA requirement to receive it. Information can be found directly on the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services website under Youth and Young Adults, or by contacting a PAL, P-A-L, worker or Transitional Living Services coordinator. We mention this because, as Tabitha shared, not every youth is told about this benefit, and awareness matters.
Tabitha, looking back, how do you feel your foster care experiences shape who you are today?
I feel that experience within the foster care system, it gave me an insight to what a trusted life and safe life can be. That experience gave me access to people that have been some of my biggest supporters in life. As I transitioned from a teenager and then went into adulthood, I didn't mention a little bit earlier that I actually worked at Texas Tech for 13 years in hospitality services. And that experience of coming from a foster care childhood and then transitioning into adulthood, of course, there was some healing and there was a journey that had to happen. And so sometimes I would reflect and like, okay, was that a good thing to do, or was this a position to be in? And I would think back to some people that, again, have been in my corner since that experience within the foster care system, or even give them a phone call and talk through that situation and have that insight. And so it really just gave me a perspective of what I want to work towards. Eventually, gave me, that season that I knew that I needed to work toward.
So what types of support or resources made the biggest difference as you transitioned into adulthood?
I definitely would say that education waiver, just being able to attend higher education with that waiver. Of course, also, I was able to apply for grants and or scholarships. And so, again, just having that support and that resource for higher education, but also within transitioning, you're able to access some financial support. There can be housing support. And so I definitely was able to kind of utilize some of those monetary resources when needed at that pivotal time.
Before I ask the next question, I want to ground it in what the research tells us. The Chapin Hall Midwest study, which followed youth transitioning out of foster care into their mid-20s, found that educational instability is one of the most consistent challenges foster youth face. Many young people experience multiple school changes while in care, sometimes 3, 4, or even more moves during high school alone. Each transition often means lost credits, disrupted relationships with teachers, gaps in curriculum alignment, and missed opportunities for extracurricular involvement. The study also found that while many foster youth aspire to attend college at rates similar to their peers, far fewer are able to persist and complete degrees. And a major factor tied to that gap is school stability and consistent adult support. So with that context in mind, and recognizing that statistics never tell the whole story, what was school like for you while you were in care?
I love that you asked this question because the high school that I attended the longest, on social media, they're gearing up for their 20-year reunion. So that tells my age just a little bit. But, that took me down memory lane in thinking about, my school journey, in childhood. In elementary, I think I attended about 7 schools, and junior high, I would say close to 5 schools, high school, 3 schools. And so definitely that instability of bouncing from schools to schools. My high school diploma actually says Coronado High, and I went to Coronado for 2 weeks in freshman year. And so if that causes, that gives you any insight of like what foster care situations can create. And so definitely think that that's just so accurate. And, you can't have connections and really develop what you want your future to look like when you're constantly facing a new school, a new city, a new situation. I definitely think that it's so accurate and think it's important that as professionals in the education system as well as in the foster care system, being aware and mindful of those situations is important.
Absolutely. I heard 15 schools.
Yeah.
Wow, K through 12, 15 schools.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds very anxiety provoking, right?
Yeah.
We just think I hate to ask, but do you get used to it at a certain point, or is it anxiety every time? Like, oh wow,
yeah, definitely. I had to become very self-aware of triggers, even in continuing education. Like, I love continuing education, and I have such a high passion for the foster care system. And so you have to find that balance as well of disconnecting sometimes to be able to stay present in the context of the situation and the conversation. Definitely just learning coping mechanisms and processes to kind of just staying present and moving forward. Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if what you would know, or any of us know, about a student changing placements in the middle of the school year at this time. Are they allowed to stay in the same school setting? Do we know that?
Yeah, so I think it's very situational because if you think about it, if a student changes placement, and especially if it's into another city, like if a family member has become approved placement because family is priority in the foster care system, no, they're definitely not going to be able to stay in the same school because they're not going to have access to the same school being in that setting. My circumstances and, kind of even just thinking about sixth grade, I remember that and going to the Children's Home of Lubbock. I was actually attending Ramirez Elementary, and it was pretty close to the end of the school year. And so I do remember in that situation, the children's home tried to provide support for a small time to have a staff member go and pick me up. But then it just kind of like, if you think about staffing and things like that, it became too hard of a challenge. So I did transition like a month towards the end of sixth grade to Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's going to be hard. Yeah. It's got to be hard for everyone, right? The teachers included.
And think about like friendships and like, how do you maintain friendships? Do you?
Yeah. Definitely. So some of my closest friends, they also experience the foster care system. And so definitely social media is so great in being able to stay connected in people. But, no, especially whenever you move cities, and you're a child who's experiencing the foster care system, you don't have probably a quarter as many friendships as a traditional child who doesn't experience the foster care system.
If you're finding value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Edu Voices, championing foster futures on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode packed with powerful stories, expert insights, and actionable strategies for supporting children in foster care. Plus, it helps us continue growing this community of educators, advocates, and change makers. Now let's get back to the conversation. If you could change one or two things about the foster care system to better prepare youth for adulthood, what do you think they would be?
I think, Dr. Palmer said it a little bit earlier, is that stability and connections with those support pieces, the professionals. I'm a firm believer that connections and relationships are the answers to so many different situations and problems. Youth are aging out of the foster care system. If they can stay connected to those people, even after, the transition happens, check-ins, because, at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, after experiencing the foster care system, you're not going to have it all figured out. I know it would be a complicated process, maybe, but, creating some type of system where there was still some stability. I know we have some great programs, and so people are always trying to be innovative and create, some solutions that may fill that gap, but I definitely think that could be one resource. And I know permanency is a focus for so many professionals in the foster care system. And so, if we can really get those teenagers permanency to where they don't have to age out of the foster care system, so that way they do have family support as they navigate that transition into adulthood, I think that could be really positive as well.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to young people currently in foster care who are thinking about their future?
Oh, I say maximize your resources. And I mean to the highest extent. If I would have looked back 10 years ago to myself, I would have never thought I'd be pursuing a master's degree right now. I just graduated with my bachelor's in fall of 2023. Some people tell me, you're still in school? And, my response is no matter what, time is going to pass by. A year's going to pass whether I'm still in school or not. And so especially if you're 17, 18 years old, I know you just want to most likely those individuals just want to get out of the system and be away from all of it. But invest in yourself and take advantage of those resources like the education waiver, like the benefits that can provide that monetary support.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, then tell us about maybe some of your mentors or the programs or relationships that you had that made a big difference in your life after foster care.
Yeah. There are a couple that really are at my core. There's a woman, I call her Miss Faye. Her name's Faye Siegel, and she worked at the Children's Home of Lubbock when I lived there. And she was just a person who didn't care if you called after care. And, those people are far few in between. And so, just throughout life, whenever, as I mentioned earlier, just didn't know, okay, what do I do? Just be able to call her and, get some guidance from a trusted adult. That's something many children who are in foster care don't necessarily have access to. There's Teresa Wilson. She works at the Children's Home of Lubbock still. She's a great connector and mentor for me. I work for CASA of the South Plains, and my leader there at CASA, she was such an unexpected mentor, but she has such a high passion to serve, the children that are in foster care. And she's been so crucial to my growth and mentoring me.
So you talked about mentors and great relationships, and thank you for sharing that. What would you want educators, caseworkers, caregivers to understand about supporting youth in foster care?
Again, as I mentioned, the relationship piece is so big. And in 2026, there are fires left and right. And so I know it's hard to try to think about giving extra support maybe to those children that are in foster care because there's so much support needed in all corners that you look, understanding that it's really important. And so no matter the extra email or conversation that you can give to give that student some extra support or child if they're a professional, they're paying attention. Even if it seems like they're not, they're going to process that information later. And so if you can, give them support and, really try to be in their corner and be that cheerleader for them as they're transitioning and experiencing the foster care system.
Yeah, I really think about a kindergarten teacher. They see the child all day long from the beginning of school to the end of school, and sometimes more than the placement gets to see them. So what might you tell a first-year kindergarten teacher?
Build a rapport with that student. It's really important. And I think especially at that age, if we think about what evidence-based research shows us is that development that's happening within that range. They're going to learn who their trusted people are in their life. They're going to learn, who do I trust? Is it my parents? Is it, my teachers? Is it my caseworkers? And so, really just try to take the time to get to learn about them and build that rapport and instill in them education is important. Take the time to do that so that way they're not just experiencing the foster care system and change and, having that lapse of information.
So what about for people considering becoming foster parents? What would you want them to know?
I want them to know that there's such a need, definitely it's so needed, and to do it. There's not enough placements in each community. In each community, there are children who have to get sent to other areas because of not enough placements. Definitely, do that, and then do your research and finding out what the agencies provide in support and being able to really make the best decision for you and your family. because of course it is a commitment. Many foster parents, they have their own children as well. And so they're bringing in new children into their homes. And so, I definitely want them to say, just kind of get rooted, get supported in your faith community and learn what the resources are as well.
When you're talking about communities, can you expand on that? What role do you think communities can play in supporting foster youth as they transition to adulthood?
So I think communities can provide so many support. I think it's always great when community members, again, want to create a new resource for individuals who are aging out of the foster care system. I always learn something new of a different resource that's existing. And, whether it's housing, mentorship, CASA volunteers, they're able to provide that advocacy for them as they're experiencing and aging out. Whatever the role is, find out. Everyone kind of knows their own capacity. Learn your capacity and then get connected and find out what exists and how can I get involved? What can I get involved in that supports these children that are aging out?
Tabitha, when you reflect on your journey, what message or hope would you like to leave with listeners today?
I would like listeners to be left with the message that there are so many ways to get connected and support children that are experiencing the foster care system right now. Legislation makes it harder and harder for children to get removed from their homes due to abuse or neglect. When children are in the foster care system in 2026, they've experienced a lot. I want to make sure that they're left with the message of, if you have a calling to get connected and get involved, find out how you can. Of course, become a CASA volunteer. That's a great way, but support other agencies who are doing the work alongside. I am just so thankful for my experience within the foster care system and the opportunities that it gave me. Because I know without a doubt, if it was not for the waiver that I received from this experience and from the people who were put into my life well over 20 years ago, I just wouldn't be in the place I am today. So I'm really thankful.
So as you've been talking today with us, you've been smiling this whole time.
Yeah.
I feel like you've just been radiating positivity and seeing beyond the dark clouds that people may associate with foster care and, trauma maybe. But that's not the impression that I've gotten from you today. And so I commend you for coming in and visiting with us, sharing your story, and just appreciating the courage that maybe it would have taken to come here today and share that. So thank you. On behalf of our listeners, we appreciate hearing your story.
Thank you.
To our listeners, thank you for spending this time with us. Conversations like this help move awareness into action. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone in education, child welfare, or community leadership.
Thank you for joining us on Edgy Voices, Champion Foster Futures. We hope today's episode sparked new insights and deepened your commitment to supporting foster youth. For updates, bonus content, and upcoming sessions, follow us on our social media outlets or visit our podcast page. But until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep advocating.